Okay, you're good.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. I'm Roberta Seymour. I'm chair of the Senior Task Force of Community Board 7. I'm thrilled to have everybody here today and thank the panel. The population of seniors in our district, which goes from 59th Street to 110th from the Hudson River to Central Park, has increased over the last 20 years from 11%. It's now over 20% of the population are seniors. So we are thrilled that our local electeds have been advocating for the needs of seniors. We thank Congressman Nadler, State Senator Hoylman and Jackson, Assembly members Rosenthal and O'Donnell, City Council member Gail Brewer and Sean Arbrew, as well as our Borough President Mark Levine. We also appreciate the members of the task force for their commitment. Today, we will learn about how to obtain affordable housing. We have 2 more forums. Next week, we will learn how to maintain in affordable housing, and the 27th, we will learn how to thrive. I especially want to thank the members of the task force and Maggie Walters from Lighthouse Guild who created the flyer for us. And special thanks to Mark Jennings, Associate Director of Project Find, for his amazing work to pull this panel together. And I turn it over to you, Mark.
Good afternoon, everyone. And again, let me just thank Roberta for her leadership as the chair of the CB7 Senior Task Force in guiding us on not just this, but multiple events, in particular for older adults in the community board. And I just want to say some very short words of thank you for coming. I'm looking forward to this education series. Just like you, we have amassed some great guests. Just as a matter of process, we're going to do a Q&A after we have a small panel discussion that's going to be led by Jenna from Wishfish, and I'm going to turn it over to her to help us begin.
Thanks so much, Mark. Hi, everyone. My name is Jenna Brinus, and I am the Director of Development at Wishfish, Westside Federation for Senior and Supportive Housing. I'm really excited to be here and have a chance to introduce our great panelists, and hopefully collectively we'll be able to answer many, if not all, of the questions that folks from the community have about how to apply for and obtain affordable housing. So I would like to introduce Caitlin Andrews from Live On New York. Caitlin is the Director of Public Policy and External Affairs at Live On New York. Live On New York is a not-for-profit representing more than 110 community-based organizations serving older adults. And many of us in Community Board 7 organizations are members of Live On. Teresa Manuel is the Vice President of New Initiatives at Constructive Partnerships Unlimited, which is otherwise known as, or used to be known as, United Cerebral Palsy Association of New York State. Teresa has worked in the supportive housing field for over 15 years with a variety of populations, and part of her job in her current role is to help individuals with disabilities access affordable housing in New York City. And Teresa is a housing ambassador, so she'll be able to talk to us about what that means and provide a lot of expertise with respect to the housing application process. And then finally, I'd like to introduce Shannon Bodnar, who is Senior Vice President of Compliance at Fairstead. Fairstead is a national affordable housing developer. So at Fairstead, Shannon provides guidance and oversight of with respect to compliance issues for low-income housing tax credit, funds, project-based rental assistance, and rent stabilization programs for Fairstead's national portfolio. Shannon has over 20 years of experience in property management and compliance issues in different parts of the country. And most recently, she was the Director of Compliance for related Affordable East region, where she oversaw the compliance of over 18,000 units across 13 states. So we're really excited to hear from all these panelists and really excited to start a conversation with folks from the community. So I think now we'll ask Max from Community Board 7 to open up slides.
Sure. If you can just direct me to which ones. I have a few ones. I have the Park 79 Project Find. I have the HPD Housing Ambassador Program, and I have the housing presentation called Housing in New York City.
So I think we're starting with Caitlin from Levon, who's going to give us an overview of senior affordable housing in New York City.
Sure, so that'll be the last presentation you mentioned.
Sure, got it. Let me share my screen. Sounds good.
So while he gets those slides up, I will introduce myself again. I'm Caitlin Andrews. I'm the Director of Public Policy and External Affairs at Live on New York. We've been around for more than 40 years, advocating in New York City and throughout New York State on issues affecting older adults. So our goal is to represent our members, including Wishfish, Project Find, Goddard Riverside, a number of organizations serving CB7 and throughout the city. And we want to make sure that the services available are the best that they can be. And increasingly through the years, we've come to focus on housing as well, knowing it's such a critical issue in New York City for so many older adults. So in this presentation, I'll start off by acknowledging the challenges that a person can face in finding affordable senior housing. It's not without its difficulties, and you're probably, if you've been looking for some time, you're not alone in the frustration of how challenging it can be to find housing. One of our goals at Live on New York is to continue to advocate for more housing, more resources, to make sure that as the demographics change in New York, the resources are available to meet that need. So we are a city that's aging, and we want to make sure that there's the safe, affordable housing, not walk-ups, really accessible buildings that any individual can thrive in. So for today, I'm just going to go over what housing exists. I'll try and give some insights as to where you might look for housing within these opportunities. And I think that the more impactful part will come from Shannon and Teresa to really get into the weeds of the opportunities that currently exist. So we can start on HUD 202s and NYCHA. So that'll be the next slide. HUD 202s are independent affordable housing for low-income older adults age 62 plus. So a lot of these buildings were built decades ago. Two examples in CB7 are Wishfish's Fania Gershom House, and Encore West is just outside of the community board, but is another example of a HUD 202 building. These are all individual buildings. There's not one resource listing where you can go and see which waiting lists are open or closed, but you can look to each individual building to see if they have a waiting list that you can put your name on and if it's currently open. I think in both of these cases, the waiting list is closed, which is the case when there's so many people that it would just give hope where probably it's going to take too long to get through that list. They'll reopen them periodically. But you can, on the left, there's a map, the Image NYC map, and there's a link there. That is a resource provided by the New York Academy of Medicine where you can put in to find where HUD 202s exist throughout the city. And then one by one can look through and try and get your name on those waiting lists. So that's one resource. Another, of course, I don't think I need to delve into this one too much, is NYCHA. So I'll skip through that. And the other affordable housing options include Mitchell Lamas. So Mitchell Lamas are affordable rental and co-op housing to moderate and middle income families, which can include seniors. Unfortunately, there are not currently open lotteries, but the resource here, that link, will show you when there are new lotteries that are open for Mitchell Lamas. But I think the biggest resource that we'll go into further today is affordable housing on Housing Connect. So these can be senior affordable rental assistance buildings, so SARA buildings, which are specifically for older adults. So Park 79 is a building that's specifically for older adults, which you'll hear about later. There's also other specific senior set-asides. So I gave the example of a building in the Bronx that's currently accepting applications that actually has a bit of a higher income range, so 54,000 to 96,000, but these are units specifically for seniors through a different tax subsidy program. And then one that you might be familiar with is Wishfish's West 108 that previously closed and had a lottery that was open. So you can go on here and specifically look for senior buildings, but make sure you're looking at all of the buildings, because unless you specifically want that, there's a chance that you're eligible for different ones. So just be looking at the income eligibility based off of the neighborhood that you're looking for, the borough, and they're constantly putting new application opportunities online, and you can receive notifications when a new one comes up. So with that, other housing types, of course, in New York City, rent stabilized housing represents a significant portion of the portfolio. This is where the rents are dictated by the government, and increases within rents are dictated by the Rent Guidelines Board. So there's only going to be a set amount that it can increase over a certain lease period. That's another type of affordable housing that exists, and you'd have to look at your lease structure to figure out if you're in something like that, or to look for a rent stabilized building. Preferential rent, many folks have an experience where maybe their landlord could set the rent at this amount, but will actually set it at a bit lower of a rent, and then that gets locked in as your preferential rent. Section 8 vouchers, which are mobile and can move with an individual for market rate housing, but to subsidize that cost. Unfortunately, Section 8 vouchers, the lottery is currently closed for that. But that is another resource that you might hear folks talking about within the context of affordable housing in New York. So then the other supports that really can help make housing more affordable, we'll be going into those next week. So screen injury, home base, one-shot deals. There's a number of other resources that might be available to you to make your current housing more affordable, or make sure at the very least, in the case of scrape, it doesn't get more unaffordable as rents go up. So making sure you freeze at whatever you're paying currently in that property. So this is just sort of a high level overview of what exists. And I'll pass it back to Jenna to move towards what opportunities are currently open and what resources are available in the community to help you navigate this process.
Great, thanks so much, Caitlin, and thanks for putting together that great overview of different types of senior housing in New York City. So next, I think I'm going to turn it over to Teresa to talk about her role as a housing ambassador, and sort of to talk about HPD's housing lottery program, Housing Connect, and then we'll shift over to Shannon at Fairstead to talk about the nitty-gritty of compliance.
So I'm going to preface to say that my slides are not as great as our previous presenter. So HPD Housing Ambassador. So who are we? So HPD realized that they need folks in the community to help individuals to navigate the housing system, because we all know that housing is so important to all of us, right? And sometimes it can be very difficult for us to navigate the system. So what HPD has done is that they have partnered with a community-based organization like mine. And what they did also was that they provided us with training in various aspects of housing. And through this training, we're able to provide the support that the community needs to navigate the housing system. So HPD created what they call a Housing Connect. And through Housing Connect, that's where folks are able to go and access affordable housing. Next slide, please. So I want to also preface that, Housing Connect is a lottery system, right? And even though it's a lottery system, it works. Sometimes folks might feel like, because it's a lottery system, will I ever get selected for housing? But I mean, I know for a fact that I've seen folks who have actually gotten accepted for housing through Housing Connect. So, the volunteers, what happens is that we give people options, right? So say, for example, you're looking for housing and you need support. You could either call us, call my office and ask to speak to me, and I'll provide my information at the end of the presentation. Or you could actually come in person into the office. Because of COVID, we have some COVID restrictions, but we have allowed people to come in if they have appointments, right? So, a person cannot just show up at my office and say, well, I want to meet with Teresa to navigate housing. So, we make ourselves available. This is a voluntary, program, and of course, we want to serve the community. And so, we're here to provide that support. So whether you want to call me on the phone or you want to come in person, you have those two options to access. Next slide, please. So with Housing Connect, you have a choice of either renting, right? And so everything is based on a person's income. So so depending on your income eligibility, that determines the type of housing that you can actually access. But Housing Connect will not only offer rental housing, you could also, if you want to purchase, you also have the opportunity to also purchase housing as well through HPD. Next slide, please. So all applicants must complete that housing application. So, while you're trying to access, housing, I mean, for you to be qualified or for you to be selected, there is an application process, and it can be a little bit tedious. And that's the reason why, we tell folks that if you're having difficulty, trying to navigate Housing Connect, you could always call us. So Housing Connect requires that you complete and create an account, right? So in the data account, you provide Housing Connect with your demographic, with your income, and also with your household information, and also your disability. So one of the things that is really unique to my organization is that we work with people that have disabilities. So we actually are fully aware of some of those disabilities, and so we're able to navigate folks through the system. We also have, staff persons available that are able to provide, support in various different languages. We have folks that speak Creole, Spanish, Mandarin as well. And so, with that availability, we're able to support a wide range of folks in New York City. There's also access to Housing Connect through a paper application. But I want to preface to say that with this application process by paper, it takes it's longer in my experience. And so, I would always say to folks, it's best for you to try to create an account online. So the address to mail your application in is 123 Main Street in Brooklyn. And Housing Connect also reminds people that you cannot apply both online and by the mail. So if you are going to send an application both by mail and online, your application will be rejected. Next slide, please. So once the account is created, you're able to go in and select your housing. So you select the housing based on your preferred neighborhood. So if you want to live in the Bronx, Brooklyn, Manhattan, if there are certain parts in those boroughs that you want to select, Housing Connect will allow you to be able to select a property in your preferred neighborhood as well. You will not be penalized if, say, for example, you're saying that, okay, I want to select a housing in Brooklyn and also in Manhattan and in the Bronx. So because you want to widen your chance of, or increase your chance rather, of accessing housing, you're able to select a variety of housing, throughout New York City. Of course, everything is based on a person's income, right? So, and the next step, of course, once you have completed the application process, you must make sure that you save your application. Because if you don't save the application, then your application, you'll not be able to go back in and continue to select housing. And of course, what we also do as an organization as well, that you can always come back to us if you're having difficulty trying to access housing. Once you create your account, we will provide that support and that assistance as well. I want to remind everyone, don't procrastinate. Once you have an online account, it's very, very important for you to make sure that you're going back and looking online to see what other options are there for you to access, right? Because one of the things that I see is that housing, apartments are always coming up on the market, right? So you want to make sure that you're checking your account, weekly, to make sure that you're not losing out on accessing housing. Next slide, please. So everyone's application will go through a random selection, right? So it's not like HPD is going to just select people or a person that they think might meet all the requirements. Yes, the person must meet all the requirements, but what happens is that everyone's application is put in a big pool, and it's selected through a computer system. So whether you mail in the application or you complete the application online, all applications are put in a pool, and that's where they make their selection. So the way how where you stand in the process, right? So once they have you have applied online for an apartment, you'll get a number. Now that number will inform you your opportunity of accessing housing. So the lower the number is, your chances of getting housing is much greater compared to someone who has a higher number. So say, for example, my number was 200 and someone else's number was 20. The person who had the lower number, the 20 number, that person's chance of accessing housing will be greater, right? But it doesn't mean that I cannot continue to try to access housing through Housing Connect, right? So if you're selected, what happens is that you will be contacted by a developer. The developer will probably ask you for certain documentation. For example, they want to make sure that they verify your income. They want to see your identification. They would also expect for you to complete a credit check. But don't have any fear, because a credit check doesn't mean that you have to have a credit check that is 700, right? From my experience, I know that people with credit scores anywhere between 560, you can be qualified for housing. They're going to also look at your rental history, right? And so that is going to be a factor in also making a determination as to whether or not you would be eligible for housing. So basically, it's really important that once you have started the process, to make sure that you start to gather all your documentation and have everything together, because once once you are called by a developer for an apartment, they expect that you provide all the documentation that they are requesting in a certain time period. You also have the option, if you feel like if once you go through the process and you're not selected by the developer, you can also, go back to HPD if you're not selected, and you can, you can put in a query as to why, you're not selected for a particular rental property, right? So, but you know what? It's again, it's based again on a person enthusiasm and eagerness to access housing. So it's this system is available, and I want to encourage anyone who's looking for housing at this point to really access Housing Connect. My name is Teresa Manuel, and my phone number is 212-947-5770. And if you call that number, you will be transferred to my extension, and I will be able to provide you with more support in accessing Housing Connect. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Teresa. That was a great overview. It's a lot of information, but I think Roberta and Max will be able to share some of the links and share people's contact information after the event.
Yes, we will. And also, I just wanted to tell people, if you have questions, you can start entering them into the chat, not the chat, we don't have a chat, into the Q&A. And then during the Q&A period, we will read from the Q&A. Thank you.
Great. Okay, so now I'm going to turn things over to Shannon, who's going to talk a little bit more specifically about the types of documents and documentation that are needed to apply for affordable housing and be determined eligible. And I think from the property management perspective, how some of those documents are reviewed. And then Shannon, I think you're also going to talk about the Park 79 project.
Yes, absolutely. So Park 79 is one of those communities that is on the Housing Connect website right now with an open lottery. So want to talk a little bit about it and its excitement, but then also about what to expect if your number is called on the lottery at Housing Connect. So go ahead and go to the next slide. So Park 79 is an exciting reimagined place for seniors in that area, in the heart of Upper West Side. It's near Riverside Park and Central Park, museums, shopping, has a great location. Also has lots of amenities. Go ahead to the next slide. We've got brand new studio apartments that are being renovated and are exciting, with great new kitchen appliances and community and meeting rooms within the facility, a landscaped garden. We have Project Find, Mark Jennings is on the call here, there to help provide services for us, and is a fully affordable community for seniors. So super excited, is on the Housing Connect lottery. So we can talk a little bit about that, although Teresa did a great job walking you through that, and then the next step. So go ahead, go to the next slide. So our lottery for Park 79, as I mentioned, open on the Housing Connect website. It opened June 3rd and will remain open until August 5th. So you do have a few more weeks to jump in and create that Housing Connect account and apply. It is open to seniors, 62 years of age or older. Wanted to share the table on the screen because you'll see this type of table in lots of the Housing Connect advertisements. It's very common. So I thought it would be a great opportunity for us to talk through a little bit how to read that and what you're looking for. So the first column on the left side tells you what size apartments are available in the community. So in our community, Park 79, there are studio apartments. And then in this community, you'll see information in kind of that light green, as well as information in gray. And that's because we have two different levels of income qualifications. So because of that, we share information in both categories because you may be eligible for one or the other or both. And so looking at your annual income, if you're a one-person household or a two-person household, and that your income falls within those ranges based upon the household size. Also, this table shares the number of units that fall in that income category. So the green category in this table is a 40% income category, which means your income needs to be at or below the 40% of area median income threshold, which is that income range you see at the end of the green section. So for one person, it's less than $33,440. For two people, it's less than $38,200. And that we have 4 units that fall in that category at Park 79. The gray section to the right of that shows you that there are 50% units as well, and it gives you that income range. So if your income is at or below that threshold, then you are welcome to apply, and we would love to have you in our lottery on the Housing Connect website. Go ahead, go to the next slide. Teresa covered this really, really well. So I'm going to skip through this really quickly, but you go to the Housing Connect website, you make your account, you put your application in. That's the most time effective way to get an application. If you don't have access to do that, you can, as mentioned before, request a paper application for us from the community at the address above. So we can go to the next slide. So the timeline, so you can understand kind of how that lottery process works within Housing Connect. Most lotteries are open 60 days. So our lottery window is from June 3rd to August 5th. A few weeks after that August 5th deadline completes, everybody is assigned randomly that log number, as Teresa mentioned, right? And so we use those log numbers and then start reaching out to people again with the lowest number. So we start with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and work through until we found candidates for each of our units that are there. So we hope to start those interviews in late August because our lottery closes August 5th. And we'll talk a little bit about that interview process and what to expect. Once we've completed that interview and you move through the process, then you move to moving in, which is always exciting. So want to talk a little bit more about what to expect in the interview if and when your log number comes up and you get to the top of the lottery. Go ahead, go to the next slide. So from an income perspective, housing providers, especially ones like us at Park 79 who are participating in affordable housing programs. We participate in 2, the low-income housing tax credit program, as well as have project-based vouchers. So we're looking for information about your income and assets. Many affordable housing providers will be looking for the same thing. And what we're looking for is your current income to be able to anticipate your income over the next 12 months. So if you have wages, that could be a W-2, could be pay stubs. If you have periodic sources like Social Security or a pension or other benefits, we're looking for that most recent benefit statement. So maybe your Social Security award benefit letter, for example, or most recent pension statement. From a self-employment perspective, we're going to look at the information about what you're earning from that self-employment activity or business activity. If you get lump sum payments, we look at those too. Some of them we count, some of them we don't, but we always want to gather information about that. So as you're preparing to come in for your interview, it's helpful to know what kind of income we're looking for, what kind of assets we're looking for, so we can talk about those verification sources and how we confirm that information. Next, let's talk about assets because that's the other part to this equation. Go ahead, go to the next slide. When we talk about our assets, we're looking for information about anything that you may have that can be converted to cash, right? So it could be property, savings accounts, stocks, bonds, really anything that you have that might be converted to cash or is cash, right? Even the cash in your pocket counts when we're looking at these types of calculations. Typically, when we're calculating the asset in terms of calculation of payments for your HUD programs, we're looking at the income from those assets. We do need to understand the cash value, but it's that income from the asset that counts in our calculation. If you have less than $5,000 of assets, our verification process and the information needed is substantially less. If you have more than $5,000, then we need to verify that information and confirm that. And so we're looking at things like the actual income from your assets, or an imputed amount, or an amount you should be able to get in interest from those assets. So again, we're going to try to gather information about that. That could be things like a 401k statement. It could be things like bank statements, savings account statements, copies of your most recent ATM receipt, right? So looking for that information to verify that, so we can create the calculations and help finalize the process for your eligibility and move-in. Go ahead, go to the next slide. So when you come to your appointment, what does it help to bring? It helps to bring information to verify those topics, right? So whatever income you may have, bring that information about where that source is coming from. So if you have an award letter or a recent pay stub, we love to have 4 or 5 or 6 pay stubs, but have that information handy. If you don't have the information handy, have contact information of who might be able to provide it. So if you have a part-time job and you need to verify that information, who's the payroll coordinator, what's their phone number or email address or fax number, so we can reach them and get that information to verify that source. Same thing with assets in our bank accounts. So looking for 6 months worth of bank account history or asset history. So if you have those or can print them out, gather them, that helps us in our calculations tremendously. In addition to the information on how to contact or verify your income and your assets, we also need information about you. So we need to know what your social security number is. Do you have a driver's license or state issued ID? What's your birth date? So bring the information to verify that as well. And then mentioned earlier briefly, but we also run as part of that process, as do most landlords, a background check, which typically includes some form of rental history and credit screening. And a lot of times we need that information for that. So extremely helpful when you come to that interview process, when your lottery number is selected, that you bring as much information about you, your income, and your assets as you can. It will help to move the process along quickly so you can be excited about moving into your new place. I think that's it for me. Thanks.
Great. Thanks so much to Caitlin, Teresa, and Shannon for providing all of this information. It's a lot of information that's been provided by everybody. I'm seeing a lot of requests for Lauren's contact information and some requests for additional information.
Yeah, and I just wanted to caveat that we're going to get out some resources to everyone who RSVP, and so we're going to use the email address that you have, and that'll get you the information for Teresa and the slides and a little bit of other information as well. So we know you can't get it all and write it all down right now in this very minute, but we'll get that out to you in some due time right after this process.
Mark, and we also can send the YouTube link because we're recording this on YouTube.
Great. So I think we are going to move into the Q&A section of our event today. So Mark, I've been sort of keeping track of the questions. We could just start at the beginning and go through them, or
that's a good process.
Okay. I'm also seeing a bunch of questions specifically about Park 79, so it might make sense to answer those at once. Okay, so the first question that I'm seeing is a question about how does senior housing work at NYCHA? So I think this is a question about how it would one apply for senior housing at NYCHA. I'm not it looks like there's not a specific process to apply for senior housing at NYCHA. I think you would go to the NYCHA website and generally apply for NYCHA housing. And then there may be an option to check a preference for senior housing, or if you get called in for an interview, you can make that preference known.
We can add that link to the information we're sending out.
Okay. So then there are two questions relating to income eligibility determination. One question about how does a bankruptcy declaration impact affordable housing eligibility, and generally how is your credit history taken into account when you apply for affordable housing? Shannon or Teresa, are you able to speak to that?
Shannon might be the best person because she's on that end.
I can chime in. I think it's a little different with each landlord, right? So each management company gets to make some of those decisions themselves in how it plays in. Credit history is not taken into account in your application process at Housing Connect, but whatever community you apply to, they have credit rental history criteria, screening criteria that they'll use. So when you apply to that community and get a log number or a lottery number, and then you come to the top and you begin that process, they'll have information about the specifics of that. Each community likely has a document that would be called like a tenant selection plan or a resident selection plan. And you can generally find the criteria related to that in that document for the community. So probably factored in many cases for that credit history, but again, it's going to be different at each community.
Yeah, and one thing HPD is doing right now is that they have aligned themselves to a financial organization that supports folks who might have some issues with their credit history, and their role is to help that person to restore their credit. So if they're concerned about credit history, there is a program available to folks to be able to address that issue. And sometimes what happens is that they also too can, they can also advocate for you on your behalf as well, where they're able to provide you with some kind of letter to support that they're supporting you in getting your credit restored. And so that is one way that also helps the person if the credit scores is needed during the housing application process.
Great, thank you. So there's a question about community preference, which in New York City is usually preference by community board. So many HPD projects have a preference. I think it's 30%. There's a preference for, I think it's 30% of the units from the community board. However, projects that are funded by project-based Section 8 senior housing projects and also HUD 202s are actually prohibited by federal regulations from having a community board preference. So Park 79, for example, doesn't have a community board preference because it's using federal project-based Section 8. So the federal regs prohibit that.
And just to jump in, you can check that on every single one of the Housing Connect portals. When you look at an individual building, you can see what the preferences are. They're all listed there. And there are other ones outside of community board that you might want to think about, mobility, vision impairment. There are other things that might change your likelihood to get an apartment.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. I know that it can often be, I don't know if Teresa or Shannon, you've experienced this, but I've always heard that it can be really challenging for the folks doing rent up and marketing to fill the mobility impaired units, which the city requires there to be some units set aside for folks who are mobility impaired and vision impaired.
Yeah, I know. Once if you indicate on the application that you have a disability, usually, I mean, Shannon, you could also verify that you are put in a separate pool, right? So I know for a fact that that there are lots of properties out there, that are available to folks with disabilities. If a person is hearing impaired, the person has a mobility, challenge, I guess it's a requirement now by law that you have to, meet those ADA requirements, right? I know that, sometimes people, who are in like larger wheelchairs may be challenged if the doors are not like 32 inches wide or wider, right? But I think most apartments are required to be ADA, meet the ADA requirements.
Right, and actually there was a sort of related question. Someone, I think, saw the image of the kitchen in the Park 79 units and asked, why kitchen cabinets are up so high in senior buildings. So all new construction buildings and buildings that are got rehabbed, I think, too, have to have a few units set aside for folks in wheelchairs. But if you're in an apartment and you are having accessibility issues, you can also request an accommodation from the landlord and work with the mayor's office of forgetting the name. Disabilities, yeah. To request a reasonable accommodation for something like grab bars in your bathroom, swapping out your bathtub for a roll-in shower, moving cabinets. And so, but city-funded affordable projects have units that are ready for folks in wheelchairs to move in, and then they also have the ability to convert other ones.
Yeah. And Jen, I just wanted to note that in addition to the questions and Q&A here, we have a few people who are in our live session at the Hamilton Center, and I think they put their hand up over there. They're in our panel.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. I had a question from someone here in the live session. It had to do, is there some form of scree available for people in, it was non-stable housing? Yeah, in non-stable housing. Non-stabilized housing.
So it's also available in Mitchell Lamas, but I think that next week's presentation will really get into all of that. I have a colleague of mine, Kim Lerner, who will be presenting, and she's really the expert on all that and knows what resources are available.
Awesome, thank you so much. We'll make sure that people here know to come back next week. And anyone who wants to participate live, you are streaming it basically in the small dining room here at the Hamilton Center.
Thank you, Dan.
So let's see. There is someone asked a question about, so what happens if you move into an affordable housing unit and your income drops? Will your rent decrease? So I could speak to this for projects that are covered by project-based Section 8, like Park 79. In those units, the Section 8 rental assistance ensures that you only pay 30% of your income, and I think you have to provide income certification information every year for Section 8, but it would be great if someone else could answer that for other types of affordable units.
I can jump in, or I don't know if Caitlin wants to. So generally speaking, if you're in some form of project-based rental assistance or project-based vouchers, as you mentioned, it will adjust based on your income, right? So you just pay 30% of your income. Some of the other programs that are out there for affordable housing, like rent stabilization or Mitchell-Lama or the low income housing tax credit program. That's not true. You just generally kind of have a lower rent, but that doesn't necessarily adjust as your income adjusts. So generally that income adjustment or income-based rent comes from those HUD programs like 202, project-based rental assistance, project-based voucher assistance, those HUD level programs. There are some little adjustments that could happen in the other ones, but generally you see that income-based adjustment in those HUD programs.
Great, thank you.
But I guess you cannot be kicked out of the apartment though.
Sorry,
what I'm saying is that you cannot be kicked out. You cannot lose your housing just because your income has changed. There are accommodations that can be made to ensure that the person stays in housing.
Like SCREE.
Yeah.
Right.
And again, that's another one we're going to rally for next week to have you here, because we're going to have home base, which deals with a lot of eviction services and pre-eviction services. And so another prelude to the more to come next week, same bat time, bat channel as you continue, Jenna.
Great, thanks, Mark. So there is a question about Park 79, and maybe I'll just lump together a few of these questions. So someone has asked how large are the units at Park 79? How many square feet? There's also a question about whether the building consists of only studios or if there are any one bedrooms. I believe it's only studios. There's also a question about the rent and why isn't the rent in the ad? And I think the answer there is that this is a building covered by project-based Section 8. So if you meet the income eligibility requirements, you pay 30% of your income. So everyone could be paying a different amount. But Mark or Shannon, do you know the size of the units at Park 79?
I don't know off the top of my head, but can absolutely put it in the information that goes out with the follow-up to this. Apologies, don't have that at my fingertips. We'll say you got all of the rest of them right though. So the rent is not listed because it is income-based rent. So it's dependent upon your income, and they are all studios.
Great, thank you.
Jenna, there's a question about what if you need physical care or someone to shop for you? And I'd recommend that people come on the 27th when we have Search and Care, DeRote, and Lighthouse Guild with answers on that one.
Great. So someone asked, I think this is another question about maybe the information from the Housing Connect ad for Park 79. The question is, what is the 50% versus the 4 apartments? I think this, and should I apply to both? I think this may be a question about the 2 different income ranges for the ad, and whether if your income is much lower, if you can apply to both unit types.
Yeah, you absolutely can apply in the Housing Connect side. Generally, we try to help people make sure they get to the right bucket in terms of if you qualify for a 40% or you qualify for a 50% unit. The 4 units, we have 4 units that are at that 40% income level, right. and then we have 49 units that are at the 50% income level.
Great. So then someone wrote in to say that they're having a problem with accessing Housing Connect. It sounds like they had a profile set up, and then when Housing Connect was updated during COVID, they've been unable to get back in. Every time they try to update their password, they get an error message. Teresa, is this something that you would be able to help them with?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So everyone who had a Housing Connect account, I think prior to 2021, they updated the Housing Connect website, and so you have to recreate an account.
Okay, great, thank you. Let's see, so there are a bunch of questions about income eligibility. Well, let's see, there's a question about what happens, I think this is similar to a previous question about what happens if your income level changes. So if, as a senior, what happens if you're working when you move into an affordable apartment with a certain income level, and then you retire and your income drops? So I think the answer here is the same answer that we provided before about, there are certain types of affordable units with rental assistance where you will pay 30% of your income, and that can be adjusted. But then there are other types of affordable units where you would really need to seek an additional resource.
And I'll just jump in. I think that if you think you might be above the income threshold right now because you're still working, but that is going to change, you're planning on retiring in a few years, and at that point you want to be prepared or proactive, that is a really good situation to be in, to put your name on a HUD 202 waiting list early, because the odds are it's going to take some time for your number to be called for that anyway. The waiting list on that could be 7 years in some cases, sometimes more. So getting your name in the second you think you're close to being in need or eligible, as soon as you really can, is important. And then by the time you get called, your situation might have changed where it was the perfect timing for you.
Great, that's really good advice, Caitlin, thank you. Let's see, okay, so there are a few questions about income eligibility and different types of eligibility. So one question is an IRA considered an asset? There's another question about what happens if you have a savings account, but that account is shared between multiple family members. And then there's also a question about how being a full-time student impacts your eligibility.
Sure. Let me try and catch all of them, and the answers vary a little bit by program. So I want to put that kind of disclaimer out there, and that I will kind of answer specific to things related to Park 79, but it does change a little bit depending on if you're a Section 202 versus a project-based rental assistance, for example. There's a little bit of variation in some of this. Generally speaking, an IRA, if it is acting as if it's a savings account and not paying you dividends regularly or paying out regularly, is an asset. If it's converted to a point where maybe you've retired and it's functioning more like a pension, then it's an income stream. So it really depends on kind of which side of that you're in at the time, and can make that transition as you make that transition. If you have access to an account, even if it's a shared account, that is considered an asset, because you can convert it to cash and then become and then have access to it as an asset, as cash. So that's there. Full-time student status is oftentimes a disqualifier for many affordable housing programs, but there are exceptions to those rules. Definitely something to look at and consider, right? There are options in each of the housing programs that allow full-time students to be part of that program. It could be something like when you began assistance. It could be the composition of your household is not entirely full-time students. It could be other things related to the composition of the household in terms of minor children and a single parent. So there are some exceptions to the full-time student rule. If you're in that situation, it's definitely a good conversation to have with the housing community that you're considering applying to. They'll be able to work through that specific guidance for the programs that they're participating in.
Great, thank you so much. There was actually a follow-up to the question that Caitlin answered, and then another similar question about, this question about if you are if you're working and you have a certain income level, and then you're retiring and your income level is going to drop. And so the question is, what income level should you enter into Housing Connect if you're putting your name in before you retire? Do you put in your current income, or do you put in what you think your income is going to be after you retire?
So this is just for HUD 202s, and Mark, you can correct me on this, but I think you're just putting down really your name and contact information at that point. And I don't think that they're collecting a lot of information. Once you're up in the queue at that point, then there will be, of course, a deeper conversation.
Correct.
And for Housing Connect, you have to put in your current income, because then you will be disqualified.
Okay. And then someone else is also asking, if you're going to be turning 62 within a few years, should you apply now or wait? And I think back to Caitlin's answer, if you're interested in HUD 202 buildings, your friend could go ahead and put their name on the list, because it can take them years to get through the list.
And I want to caveat that if you do put your name on the list and it goes swifter than the 5 years or 7 years, and you get called before the age, you could be disqualified at that point. So it is a little gamble, but it's a good gamble in most cases, because those lists do take a while to really work through.
Okay, great. Let's see. So there's a question from somebody who applied for a building lottery many years ago on paper. I guess this was before Housing Connect was online. And they want to know if they can open an account online through Housing Connect now without worry about being disqualified for having a double application.
I would recommend a person do an online account now, because again, the system has changed, so they would not be disqualified.
And just to confirm, Teresa, you can apply for multiple buildings at one
Multiple
time.
buildings, yes, in all the boroughs at the same time. You would not be disqualified.
Right. The problem is just if you apply to the same building twice, either through Housing Connect or through Housing Connect online, and then a paper application.
Right, a paper application, so it's either
problem.
or, yes.
Okay, great.
And we do have the Hamilton Senior Center open.
Oh, okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, it was just a super quick question. Somebody was asking if when they're listing their eligibility and other factors, do they have to disclose veteran status if they perhaps are a veteran but don't want to put that on an application? Is it something that if they are they mandatorily required?
I would suggest put it on there. If you're a veteran, there are benefits to being a veteran. So I would not include, the thing about it is that they're going to find out somehow. So if you don't put stuff on there and they find out that you didn't disclose this information, you're going to be disqualified. So
Thank you.
I would suggest you be, transparent.
On that, many communities also have preferences for veterans, so it might actually help the process move quicker for you. Not all communities, but many communities do. So it may be a benefit.
Great, thank you. So there is a question about how someone is asking how an eviction and a housing judgment, which occurred due to a divorce, impact your housing application.
I'll jump in, although anybody else feel free to hop on. Each landlord is a little different, so each management company or ownership entity is going to look at that process just a little differently. I think to the earlier point, always good to disclose things up front, and many times in affordable housing, even if it initially presents a barrier, there's an opportunity to go back through and present additional information that you would like to be considered. So each spot's going to be different. I can't give you a yes, it's going to work, or no, it's not going to work kind of process, but would say be upfront and disclose it, and be prepared to have conversations about it and how things in your situation may or may not have changed.
Great, thank you. So someone is asking how much time it takes after you've been approved to move in.
I mean, I'll say that it depends, right? Because there's multiple approval processes. Every place is going to be different. Some places have to send your application to HPD to be approved, and then that gets approved, and then you have to get a subsidy to then approve. And so there's several approval chains. Sometimes you may have no subsidy and you have your own move-in funds, and as soon as something is approved, you can move right in. You can get a date right away. So it really does depend on situations for each place being a little different, and whether you have a subsidy or not based on some of those approval sources. And again, whether or not there's a secondary approval, because the landlord can say, we like you, but then they may need to send it to a government body or someone for a secondary approval, and that could take a little bit of time as well.
Great, thanks, Mark. So there's another question about if illness or progressive disability means that someone moves into needing a wheelchair. But I think this question is asking about accommodations in the apartment. This specific scenario seems to be someone who is resistant to using a wheelchair. But I think the larger question is really about, goes back to this, the option of requesting a reasonable accommodation for things to be changed in your apartment to make them more accessible. So things like, the Mayor's Office of Disability, we can provide that link, and there's information on there about reasonable accommodations. So people have requested things like for their apartment, like grab bars and changing out tubs. But people have also been successful in getting ramps put in the front of their building if their building isn't currently accessible.
And for a lot of the new buildings that you'll see on Housing Connects, they're going to be very compliant in the first place. So they're going to have elevators in the building and making sure that the doors aren't too heavy, where they're difficult to pull when you're getting in. So there's a lot of enforcement that goes on even prior to move in to make sure that the building is as accessible as possible for an older adult. And if there are additional accommodations that are needed on top of that, you'll be able to have those discussions. But the common areas, et cetera, are really intended to be as accessible as possible.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you, Caitlin.
And we're going to have the Human Rights Commission in the next session as well.
Oh, great.
To be able to help with some of these answers as we continue the conversation.
So someone is raising the issue of folks with Section 8 vouchers who are having problems finding apartments that will accept their voucher. They are describing a scenario where it took somebody a year to find a new apartment that would accept Section 8. And yeah, this is a real issue. The city is aware of it. There have been a lot of stories in the media about this. Unfortunately, I think that the staff who were charged with dealing with this kind of income-based discrimination at the city. A lot of those folks have left, and I'm not sure if they've been rehired. But yes, this income-based discrimination is a really big problem. And obviously the city needs to be doing more to make sure that people in Section 8 can find apartments.
Yeah, they're hiring now for a lot.
Are they?
Refill a lot of those roles, I believe.
That's good. So your local elected, your local council members, your local assembly member, your local, at least in Community Board 7, we're very lucky because all of our offices have somebody in them that works with people who are having housing problems. So I recommend anyone having a problem go to their council member or their assembly member or their state senator or even their congressman.
Great, that's good advice. Let's see, someone is also asking about, it sounds like they have applied for housing on Housing Connect many times, and they feel like they're only getting offers from buildings in the Bronx, but the Bronx doesn't make sense for them because they work and go to school in Lower Manhattan. So they're trying to figure out if there is a way that they can make sure they're getting offers from buildings that are closer to where they need to be.
So on Housing Connect, I mean, you're selecting the neighborhood that you want to live in and the borough. So I'm not sure why they would be offering you a property that's not in your preferred neighborhood and your preferred borough. So that's yeah. But if I know about a specific issue, I mean, maybe we could take it to HPD and see, what can be done. Because if you select a property in Manhattan, then they should be calling you, if you're selected to have an apartment in Manhattan, not in the Bronx. So.
Right. I mean, one thing that's probably going on is just the fact that there's such a high percentage of new affordable housing is being built in the Bronx or further out in Brooklyn. It's being built in places where developers can purchase the land for cheaper, so that the public funds that are available are enough to cover the construction of a new building. So that is something that the new administration seems to want to focus on, to make sure that there is more affordable housing being developed in different parts of the city. But that will take some time to implement. Let's see. So there's another question about whether an IRA being held and managed by a major bank is income. I think this may have been answered before, but maybe this person joined late.
If the IRA is functioning more like a savings account, meaning you put money in but nothing's really coming out, and coming to you on a regular basis, then we look at it as an asset. If the IRA, if you've retired and switched to the IRA is sending you a dividend check or payments on a regular basis, whether that's monthly or quarterly, then it looks as income. But remember that when we're looking at assets, if assets have a value of greater than $5,000, we do look at the income from that asset. So any interest or additional funds you've earned, that income on that asset may be counted.
Great, thank you, Shannon. So there are two questions about landlords. One question is, what if you're selected for affordable housing, but your current landlord won't let you break your lease? And then the other question is, if you get approved for affordable housing or you're being interviewed for affordable housing, would the affordable housing project contact your current landlord for a reference or reach out to the entity that's property managing your current residence for a reference as part of your affordable housing approval process?
I guess with the person's consent, but not just going out and asking for a reference. I don't think it works like that. I don't think they have the right to ask for a reference that way. So, I mean, I don't know what Shannon or Caitlin know about this, but this is my experience.
Typically, you're 100% correct. So typically, if they're going to reach out to a landlord, which is dependent upon the community and the landlord or the management company, right? But if they are going to reach out to a former landlord, typically done with consent, right? You've got to sign a form that says you agree to allow them to reach out to so-and-so landlord. And typically the questions are included on that. So you can see what questions your potential new landlord is asking your current or previous landlord. But again, it varies a little bit by property and by management company.
And Teresa and Shannon, typically landlords are going to run like a landlord guard or some sort of check that is the primary way of sort of looking at what are your housing, any housing court cases or other things. And so if I get that run, am I able to get a copy of that information to be able to see it and look at it if as a part of my application?
Well, usually when you do the background screening, you're going to see the person that have been to housing court. So you already know the person had some issues with paying their rent. So again, it all depends. Like, as I think it was Caitlin or Shannon mentioned this earlier, that, it varies. It varies, by landlord, property managers, because it all depends on what happened in the person's past, why the person was not able to pay their rent. So I don't think that, that might be a reason why the person is not selected for housing.
And I would just add on to all of this. If you're just apply, if you really need this affordable housing and it's going to make a difference in your life and you look like you might be eligible, apply. You will go through the process. They'll explain what is making you eligible or what's making you ineligible. And you don't want to take yourself out of having a chance that you might have actually succeeded in getting. There's a lot of folks in New York City with histories, housing history. It's difficult to have a perfect credit score, a perfect income level, every single thing. So just make sure if this is something you need, you give yourself that shot.
I wholeheartedly agree with Caitlin in that. Absolutely throw your name in the hat. I think if something comes up that may be a disqualifier, you're going to have a conversation with the landlord about that. Many times there's an opportunity to sort of appeal that or provide some additional information, whether that's an appeal or a grievance process. And so put your name in the hat, go through the process. If it comes up, there'll be that secondary chance in most cases for you to have some additional information or to provide some things that maybe would allow for reconsidering that decision. And then to the earlier question, Mark, about do you get access? If there is a denial because of something run by the screening company, landlords are required to provide the information about that. So we typically will say, here's where we got our information. You can reach out to them and get a copy of that report. If there's not, you likely can still have a copy of it because it's part of your tenant file. But typically we only see it come up in those cases where it might be something that creates the denial.
Great. Thanks so much, everybody. And there's a question about pet ownership at Park 79. Are pets allowed?
At Park 79, yes. But again, this is one of those things that varies by community, but at Park 79, yes.
The person who asked about trying to get out of a lease with a current landlord in order to move into an affordable apartment, they're asking if there's any help available. My guess is this is a situation where they might want to talk to a local elected or attorney, the community board. Anyone else have other ideas?
in CB7, Gail Brewer started when she was in the city council years ago, but she works with God Riverside, and once a month they have a housing clinic, and there are lawyers that come to the housing clinic. And even if it's not on a specific topic, there are lawyers at God Riverside that can be very helpful. So at least if you're in Community District 7, there is some wonderful resources.
Great, thank you. I think we've reached the end of all of the questions in the Q&A. I don't know, Mark, if we should check in with the Hamilton Center and see if there's anyone else there with questions.
No more hands raised, so I think we probably good. And just want to thank everyone again for participating, for the questions, for the expertise provided, and want to caveat again that we'll gather our resources and get things out to you. And please come back again next Wednesday at 2 p.m. For more information of the like. So thanks everybody for.
Thanks everybody.
Thanks. Okay.
I should also just mention that a bunch of people chimed in to thank everybody for providing all of this information and have said that this has been really helpful. So thanks so much, Mark, for putting this all together. It was a lot of work.
Okay, bye everyone.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.